October 1st, 2015. The autumn air feels heavy as a 62-year-old American businessman steps out of a government building in North Korea. His waiting car sits a few meters away, promising a quick departure from another routine meeting. Suddenly, a familiar figure approaches him in broad daylight. It is one of his secret assets, acting completely against protocol. The man presses a highly classified USB drive directly into his palm. Panic instantly floods his veins. Exchanging sensitive intelligence in public is a surefire death sentence in the most surveilled nation on Earth. The asset flashes a brief, unnatural smile before slipping away into the gray crowds. Before the American can react, a high-ranking counter-espionage officer slides into his car. The trap has been flawlessly sprung, marking the catastrophic end of an impossible 6-year espionage run. To understand the sheer gravity of this capture, one must look at the impenetrable fortress that is North Korea. It is a nation completely sealed by barbed wire, paranoia, and a relentless surveillance state. Every foreign visitor is closely shadowed by minders. Citizens are conditioned to view their neighbors as potential informants. The internet is locked down, and private phone calls are a dangerous illusion. For decades, Western intelligence agencies found themselves entirely blind inside this hermit kingdom. Sophisticated satellites orbiting high above could map out missile launch sites and track broad troop movements. However, billion-dollar technology could never capture the quiet whispers shared in dimly lit rooms. The reliance on outdated defectors and offline networks left massive gaps in critical intelligence. At times, the CIA relied on rumors from sushi chefs. Placing a human operative inside the country seemed like an insurmountable challenge. South Korea had sent hundreds of covert agents across the heavily militarized border over the years. Tragically, very few of them ever survived the mission. The regime executed anyone suspected of leaking information, creating an environment of absolute terror. North Korea officially became the absolute hardest of hard targets for any intelligence agency worldwide. By 2009, the geopolitical landscape grew increasingly unstable as the regime rapidly accelerated its nuclear weapons program. Washington found itself growing increasingly desperate for actionable inside information. They had spent trillions of dollars building an unmatched global intelligence apparatus. Yet they had absolutely nobody on the ground inside the one place America needed eyes the most. The intelligence void was a ticking time bomb. To successfully infiltrate a spy into this paranoid dictatorship, the CIA would essentially have to invent a phantom. They needed someone who could enter the country legally and blend into the environment over several years. This individual would have to earn the deep trust of high-ranking officials without ever triggering a single alarm. An American wandering around Pyongyang was normally as conspicuous as a neon sign during a blackout. However, an unbelievable anomaly already existed within those heavily guarded borders. He was not a highly trained covert operative, molded at a secret facility. He was a humble Baptist pastor hailing from the quiet suburbs of Virginia. His name was Kim Dong-chul, and he had willingly walked into the tiger cage armed only with a bold business proposal and a deeply held desire to help people. Kim had established a legitimate foothold in the Racine Special Economic Zone, completely bypassing the massive barriers that stopped trained spies. He ran a successful hotel, dined comfortably with local government officials, and even received personal commendations from the supreme leader. The American intelligence community had stumbled upon their ultimate white whale entirely by accident. A golden door was standing wide open right before them. But discovering an asset and convincing him to risk his life are entirely different challenges. Would an ordinary civilian genuinely agree to take on a deadly role he never trained for? This was a high-stakes game where a single misstep meant disappearing into a brutal labor camp. The ensuing tale of espionage and survival would redefine everything the world thought it knew about intelligence gathering. The path that led Kim Dong-chul to the isolated capital of Pyongyang was anything but a conventional spy origin story. Born in Seoul in 1953, he immigrated to the United States seeking a better life in 1980. He eventually settled in Fairfax, Virginia, embodying the quintessential immigrant success story. He became a naturalized citizen, earned a doctorate in theology, and faithfully served his community as a pastor. He was certainly no James Bond figure equipped with lethal combat skills or a license to kill. Instead, he was a man who quoted scripture and deeply valued human connection. In the early 2000s, Kim felt a strong spiritual calling to assist his fellow Koreans suffering across the globe. Alongside his wife, who possessed intriguing family connections, he relocated to northeast China to work as a missionary. From their base near the border, they provided vital humanitarian aid to ethnic Koreans struggling in the region. It was through his wife's unique family lineage that unexpected doors began to swing open. One particular relative maintained high-level links to the inner circle of Pyongyang. This cousin was deeply embedded within the elite ranks of the North Korean military, offering a rare bridge into the forbidden territory. Thanks to these vital ties, Kim received an extremely rare invitation from the United Front Department to invest in the country in 2004. He boldly walked through that heavily guarded door, arriving in the Racine Special Economic Zone. This was an experimental area where the regime cautiously tested the waters of foreign investment. Kim went all in, pouring his entire life savings of over $2 million into building a hotel. Incredibly, this massive financial gamble paid off in ways nobody could have anticipated. Kim quickly transformed into a model foreign entrepreneur in the eyes of the state. The totalitarian government actually liked him because he created local jobs and generously donated essential food and medicine. The administration even awarded him personal commendations over several years. An American businessman being praised by this regime was a spectacular anomaly. By 2009, Kim had spent 5 quiet years living his double life as a successful investor and secret humanitarian. He had absolutely no idea that Washington analysts were closely watching his every move. The Central Intelligence Agency had discovered his presence and recognized a once-in-a-lifetime operational opportunity. Here was an American passport holder firmly established behind the most impenetrable enemy lines on Earth. Sometime later that year, the inevitable approach finally happened. Intelligence agents, first from South Korea and then the United States, initiated contact. Their pitch was incredibly straightforward, yet carried the weight of the world. They asked him to become a human listening post inside the dictatorship, transmitting the crucial secrets that billion-dollar satellites simply could not see. The request left the mild-mannered pastor completely stunned. If he accepted this dangerous proposition, every single day would become a high-wire act without a safety net. The agents made no sweet promises regarding his safety. If caught, he would face immediate torture, a public show trial, and execution. There would be no daring rescue missions or prisoner swaps to save him. He would be entirely on his own, in the most hostile territory imaginable. Despite the terrifying risks, 2 powerful factors ultimately swayed his decision. First, his deep compassion for the impoverished citizens living around him fueled a strong desire to bring about change. He had witnessed their profound suffering up close and could not look away. Second, the handlers expertly appealed to his sense of patriotic duty. They reminded him that he was the only American positioned to protect his homeland from a nuclear threat. Realizing that walking away might slam this crucial door shut forever, Kim made the fateful choice to say yes. Since there was absolutely no time to extract him for a formal training camp, they taught him spycraft on the fly. During brief trips out of the country, he learned to use hidden cameras, earpieces, and simple communication codes. He returned to his hotel carrying a secret that could easily cost him his life. Returning to his daily routine in the Special Economic Zone, Kim Dong-chul knew nothing would ever be normal again. While strolling through the bustling docks, he casually chatted with an army officer, appearing to be just a friendly foreigner. In reality, the tiny camera concealed within his wristwatch was rapidly clicking away, capturing sensitive uniform badges and classified documents. He was mastering the dark art of pretending every single second of his life. His very first batch of intelligence successfully made it out across the border. He discreetly slipped encrypted files into a prearranged dead drop during a routine supply run to China. The immediate response from his handlers was pure exhilaration, calling the gathered material absolute gold. He had successfully photographed strategic elements that multi-billion-dollar spy satellites simply could never detect. The lone human antenna was officially live and transmitting. Kim quickly realized that relying solely on his own eyes and ears would severely limit his operational reach. To acquire truly valuable material, he desperately needed insiders who could access restricted areas. He began slowly expanding his shadow network, expertly exploiting a fatal weakness within the regime. Decades of severe economic mismanagement had left even the most loyal party members struggling to feed their own families, making them highly susceptible to bribery. Foreign currency was the ultimate key to survival in this broken system. Kim systematically identified lower-level officials who were underpaid, deeply dissatisfied, or simply driven by raw greed. He approached a border guard capable of slipping him shipping manifests and a ministry clerk who could copy restricted files. He carefully disguised these illicit transactions as innocent business research, paying a few $100s for seemingly mundane logistical information. To the desperate locals, the wealthy American was merely sharing his vast resources in exchange for harmless operational details. However, to the analysts back in Langley, every single one of these individuals was now an unwitting informant. By the end of his incredibly tense first year, Kim managed to reel in his first major target. He recruited an actual military officer completely willing to sell high-level defense secrets for cold hard cash. This compromised officer handed over detailed documents regarding a highly sensitive naval installation. When those files finally reached the desk of American intelligence analysts, the room fell completely silent in sheer disbelief. Securing reliable human intelligence directly from the hostile military was an unprecedented victory. As Kim passed envelopes of crisp dollars to his new asset, his confidence surged, driving him to push the boundaries even further into the darkness. By his second year, he had successfully recruited a trading company official and a border customs officer. He was no longer just an isolated listener. He was actively transforming into a master spy running a formidable network. Around 2011, his handlers tasked him with an extraordinarily dangerous mission. They urgently demanded physical, undeniable proof of the rapidly advancing nuclear weapons program to confirm the terrifying rumors echoing in Washington. Through quiet whispers in the underworld, Kim located a desperate scientist heavily involved in the nuclear research sector. A brilliant and highly risky plan quickly took shape in the shadows. For a substantial sum of money, the scientist smuggled out a small, immensely valuable object. It was a block of highly pure zinc stamped with old Soviet markings, a critical component utilized in the production of nuclear warheads and advanced missile systems. Getting this physical piece of the nuclear puzzle out of the country required nerves of absolute steel. Kim managed to hide the radioactive material deeply within his luggage during a routine business trip across the Chinese border. When the physical sample was finally delivered to U.S. intelligence, the agency was absolutely ecstatic. This untrained, middle-aged pastor had just pulled off a legendary heist that the world's premier spy agency only dreamed of. The phenomenal success of his espionage ring inevitably brought a crushing psychological weight bearing down upon his shoulders. By the end of his second year, half a dozen locals were secretly working for him, transforming his operation into a sprawling web. Every newly recruited person represented a catastrophic vulnerability waiting to be exploited. Each morning, Kim woke up in his modest hotel room, his heart pounding wildly, wondering if today was his final day. The burden of total isolation was suffocating. He could never confide his terrifying reality to his business partners, his local acquaintances, or even his loving wife across the border. He was forced to live a fractured existence, where one half of his soul constantly lied to the other. Yet he heroically pushed through the agonizing paranoia, surviving the relentless tension of 2010, 2011, and 2012 without detection. As the years dragged on, the insatiable appetite of Western intelligence only grew more demanding. They constantly demanded to know about secret weapons tests, military promotions, and the hidden identities of nuclear scientists. Kim worked frantically to satisfy these endless requests, bribing port officials to uncover mysterious shipments of suspected missile parts. He even manipulated a military policeman into revealing the exact deployment locations of elite combat units near the tense Russian border. Every smuggled photograph and coded report was celebrated as a massive victory back in Langley. However, The sheer scale of his success was rapidly weaving a deadly net around him. By year 5, Kim had cultivated dangerous contacts spanning across the entire country, from the capital down to the major ports. He had become an invisible spider resting at the center of a secret web, but the regime's counterintelligence forces were not asleep. The authorities had always monitored foreign businessmen closely, and subtle anomalies in Kim's behavior were slowly bubbling to the surface. The Security Bureau likely noticed that certain military officials were meeting this American hotelier far too frequently. He was asking far too many specific questions regarding restricted naval bases and troop logistics under the guise of commercial interest. In a society deeply paranoid about foreign spies, his luck could not hold out indefinitely. Despite sensing the encroaching danger, Kim felt completely trapped by his own profound sense of duty. He had been feeding crucial intelligence to his homeland for 5 grueling years, and he knew his handlers possessed no viable replacement. If he suddenly vanished, his entire network of informants would be left exposed to the regime's brutal wrath. He bravely chose to stay, desperately hoping he could stretch his miraculous streak just a little bit longer. The fatal crack in his armor did not stem from a spy mission, but rather a chaotic business dispute. In late 2014, a local construction crew brazenly demolished a wall of his hotel without permission while he was traveling. Furious at the blatant corruption, Kim publicly denounced the local officials, causing a massive scene. According to some accounts, he aggressively threatened to end his own life in front of the supreme leader's statues. In this tightly controlled dictatorship, causing a public disturbance near sacred monuments is considered an act of severe treason. By loudly declaring he would rather die than tolerate local corruption, he painted a massive, glowing target directly on his own back. It was this seemingly mundane dispute that finally alerted the highest levels of the regime that the American investor required a much closer, deeply forensic investigation. The deadly countdown had officially begun. In October 2015, the regime prepared to host a grand celebration for the ruling party, inviting foreign investors to attend. Despite feeling the intense heat of surveillance closing in, Kim crossed the border for what would be his final time. He immediately noticed that the atmosphere had changed dramatically, with cold eyes tracking his every single movement. The intelligence agencies were finally moving in to spring their meticulously crafted trap. Following the disastrous USB handover outside the government building, Kim Dong-chul vanished completely into the black hole of the secret police. For several agonizing months, the outside world had absolutely no idea whether the American spy was still alive. Inside the hidden interrogation chambers, he was violently plunged into an unrelenting nightmare of physical and psychological torment. His ruthless captors demanded the full names of every single contact within his sprawling intelligence network. Kim valiantly held out for as long as humanly possible, but the brutal methods employed to break him were truly beyond imagination. He endured savage daily beatings, extreme sleep deprivation, forced starvation, and repeated electric shocks. At one horrifying point, guards shattered his fingers under their heavy boots to force a confession. The physical trauma inflicted upon him was so severe that it would leave him permanently unable to stand completely straight. Consumed by overwhelming despair and desperate to protect his highest-level assets, Kim attempted to end his own life by inhaling toxic gas. He briefly lost consciousness, only to be revived by guards dousing him in freezing water. A sadistic interrogator sneered at him, explicitly stating that he was not allowed to die until the regime granted him permission. Ultimately, the relentless torture shattered his resolve, forcing him to surrender lower-level names to survive. The tragic consequence of his forced confession resulted in the execution of 6 local individuals who had bravely aided his mission. In March 2016, a broken and visibly battered Kim was shoved in front of television cameras in Pyongyang. He was forced to read a meticulously prepared script, publicly admitting to stealing classified military secrets. Shortly after this humiliating spectacle, a heavily orchestrated show trial sentenced him to 10 years of grueling hard labor. Stripped of his identity, the master spy became simply known as Prisoner 429 within the walls of a brutal labor camp. The endless days blurred into a haze of agonizing toil, digging frozen earth and carrying back-breaking loads despite his severe injuries. He suffered from dangerous exposure to toxic chemicals and rapid weight loss, nearly dying on several occasions. Meanwhile, massive geopolitical shifts were slowly unfolding entirely outside of his dark reality. a fierce diplomatic standoff eventually gave way to a sudden thaw in relations between Washington and Pyongyang. American envoys aggressively pressed the regime regarding the release of captive citizens. On May 9, 2018, after enduring 31 months of absolute hell, Kim was finally handed over to U.S. diplomats. Within hours, he stepped onto the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews, an emaciated but free man shaking hands with the American president. Back in the safety of the free world, Kim deeply struggled to rebuild his shattered life. He lived with profound physical pain and a heavy heart, mourning the tragic loss of his network and his former existence. Despite the staggering cost, his unprecedented 6-year run remains one of the most miraculous feats in modern espionage history. He successfully infiltrated the world's most paranoid state, delivering priceless intelligence that shaped international security policy. He proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that even the most impenetrable fortress possesses critical structural cracks. A 62-year-old grandfather with zero formal training had expertly exploited those vulnerabilities to protect his homeland. While there are no grand monuments erected in his honor, his legacy as the lone border rider will forever echo in the shadows. He defied the impossible, fundamentally proving that true courage often thrives in the darkest places. Success in the dangerous world of intelligence is rarely defined simply by making a clean getaway. Sometimes, true victory is measured by how long a solitary individual can boldly defy insurmountable odds before destiny finally catches up. Kim Dong-chul sacrificed almost everything he held dear, yet he accomplished an operational miracle that the premier intelligence agencies could only imagine. His chilling story will forever stand as a testament to human endurance and sheer will.